Track like.
Welcome back to another Fight Back interview, a video series that dives into the people, the personalities, and the passions that are driving our industry forward. We are delighted to have this episode powered by Mission Omega. Mission Omega was founded in response to the growing need to fight fraud, scams, and other financial and human crime. Omega provides expertise, resources, and support to banks, credit unions, financial services organizations, merchants, and technology companies. They serve as an extension of internal teams responsible for fighting financial crime. And what we love most about them is Mission Omega is a mission-driven fraud services company. And we don't encounter those all the time. So without further ado, let's get after it. All right, welcome to our next Fight Back interview. I am really excited to be joined by Brian Russell, who I'm going to have him give his intro, name, title, potentially all the many places he's been. So without further ado, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing, PJ. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite, and always appreciate catching up with you and sharing my insights. So I am currently the founder and CEO of Da Vinci Partners Consulting. I have been in the payments and identity and fraud fighting space for about 15 years. My last three companies that I worked for were all top 10 banks. JPMorgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and US Bank, where I built enterprise platforms for identity fraud risk management. And those covered all of the capabilities from the perimeter security through the onboarding and identity proofing, your standard authentication, your logins, your step-ups, your KYC monitoring, and payments authorization. It's been a great run, and I really enjoyed working with a very broad set of stakeholders. And that's really where I got engaged with a lot of the fraud fighting teams. These are platforms that provide a minimum level of security for the bank, but also provide really key capabilities for our fraud and our risk and our BSA AML partners. Prior to that, I worked at Mastercard, did a few Silicon Valley startups in payments. But, the last 15, 20 years, it's all been payments, identity, and fraud.
Awesome. And that's a good segue into kind of where I want to start, which is in the 90s. And when you were coming up through Mastercard, you had different roles, biz dev, strategy, definitely business focused roles, but I don't believe there was any fraud or identity then. So I guess what drew you, as your career progressed, what drew you into the fraud and identity space?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was with Mastercard for about 5 years in the 90s, and it was a great time to be there because they obviously were and continue to be a huge player in the payment space and really one of the big drivers of innovation in the space. So for me, some of the companies I worked for previously had been in the payment space. So to get in with a MasterCard, learn the ecosystem, learn how everything works, how all the money flows, all the liabilities, all the security was incredibly important. My role there was focused around smart cards. And at that point in time, huge innovation. Outside of the US, telecommunications costs were incredibly high. So you couldn't go online with every single transaction to approve it. So there were floor limits. And what EMV allowed retailers and banks outside the US to do is to validate or authorize those transactions securely offline. Obviously, the EMV did not take off in my first run at Mastercard, but I did a tremendous amount of work there internationally, doing international business development and learning how innovation and technology can really change the business. Fast forward about 10 years, I took a position running the U.S. payments business for G&D Mobile Security, a Munich, Germany-based technology company. And that's really where all of this really started to come together. I would always joke that this was kind of my do-over from my Mastercard EMV days. So this is when EMV started out in force. And G&D had been a traditional card manufacturer. So when I came in, we built out the personalization of the cards. G&D did payments. It also did telecom. And one of their biggest products was manufacturing and managing SIM cards. And at that point, mobile commerce had really started taking off. And what we started to see was both in EMV chips and your SIM cards, where you were using hardware-based PKI security to secure the credentials of the individual. And that's really kind of where all the identity pieces started to flow together. So we had the convergence of payments and the mobile devices, and we also had that convergence of pure digital. So everybody going online, whether it's a phone, your laptop, or your iPad, or whatever, that digitization started taking place. So my team took what was a physical world, card manufacturing, personalizing, distributing the card, just starting to build one of those first infrastructures around digital credential management. And the credentials were essentially the same that were in the chip. And it didn't matter if the chip was 10 feet away from the computer that was loading the PII onto the chip, or 2,000 miles away when we did it through a mobile phone and the SIM card. So this is where the convergence happened. And as we started building out this ecosystem, it was really interesting because we did everything from digital wallets to host card emulation, tokenization. We started working with the Internet of Things and wearables, and eSIMs were coming in. So there was a lot of technology coming in as we digitized these different channels. And as we digitized them, we realized the fraudsters are super smart. And they were finding ways to get in that we had never thought about on these new digital channels. So that's how you started to see this ecosystem start coming together of security, right? And payments, and then identity, and then the fraud that was, a part that always came along.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. And, as I started moving on to the bank side, some of the early days of banking, there was a lot of banks that had digital platforms and digital only platforms. And the problem was you wanted everyone to come on digitally and engage digitally. Then you realize you didn't have the tools to actually know that that was PJ that was coming in to open an account for PJ. So it's really interesting to see how these spaces have really converged together over the last 10 or 15 years. And that's how I got pulled into this wonderful world of identity management and fraud management.
Yeah. And everyone has a different story, which is what I like. I think yours, the card experience, the payments experience into the different technology and channels in which we transacted and identified one another and onboarded the digitization, all that experience, and then where security is involved in there, laid the groundwork for probably the identity and fraud work you did at those three big banks you mentioned. And that so that leads into my question, because you kind of grew up on the business side of fraud fighting. But by that, I mean, kind of owning and understanding the strategic development, these transformation initiatives, the digitization, which is, and then how that drove value or challenges in the identity and fraud lines of business. That was, you were kind of coming in through that track. And some other people, people come in different varieties. Some come up more through the fraud org. It could be fraud ops or analytics or whatever it is. So I guess when you moved to those banks and you were kind of leading from a strategic level and a transformation level, and probably how do you get all of these different identity and fraud and teams to kind of sync up. What did you learn from maybe the people who grew up in the fraud org, which probably had different objectives or personalities or specialty skills? Like, how did you learn from those individuals?
I learned a lot. I was going to say yes, yes, and yes to all the points that you made. And I've worked for a lot of large organizations, and kind of the way to look at it is, it's like putting together a baseball team, right? Like you have different people with different skills that play different positions that contribute differently. For the most part, everyone has to throw the ball and hit the ball. So they all kind of learn from each other, how does an infielder throw versus a catcher throw? Right? So the point is that you need the diversity in these large organizations, because you need people that are real specialists in these areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the magic is kind of, from an executive standpoint, is having the right culture and having the right approach to the business, driving it from a team oriented perspective, because each of us brings very specific skill sets. There are some things that I've worked on in the past where it involved card manufacturing and personalizing data to use downstream. And I just happened to have that skill. So I would bring it to the table. And I think you see that everywhere. But from the fraud standpoint, I think everyone in this ecosystem. So you've got your line of business, which is trying to figure out, like, I'm getting all these new customers, but I'm not making as much money. You've got, your information security people that are trying to put as many controls in place and find the right level of controls. You've got digital product managers that are trying to build platforms. You've got line of business partners like your enterprise fraud, your line of business fraud, that are trying to solve the problems. And they have just a deep understanding of the products, the customers, how the customers interact with us, what types of problems they have. They bring a unique perspective. And what I think I always brought was a way to work with them and help them build platforms and systems to make the decisioning easier.
Yeah.
Automating as much as you can, and to provide you with the oversight tools so that you can really manage that business, because it is extraordinarily challenging.
Yeah.
And as with the fraud folks that I worked with, these big banks, you're going to go into the branch, you're going to go to the ATM, you're going to go to the call center, you're going to use your digital platforms. Think of the complexity that the fraud fighting team has to have and the expertise. And they need those systems and infrastructure being able to link all of the transactions together. So a lot of the work that we would do, and I was a digital platform owner. So my job was to build, the best in class SaaS platform so that the lines of business could most effectively and efficiently run their business, which meant the fraud team had all the tools in place in every step of that customer journey to look at historically what had the customer done, what is the risk that they have at this point in time in this transaction, providing them with tools to assess that risk so they can make those decisions. So it was really interesting. Like, I knew all the vendors and all the tools because I went from the vendor side and then I went from the sell side to the buy side. So I kind of knew both of them. But yeah, the fraud teams, like I said, they really understood the products. They understood where all the pain points were. They understood kind of where we were lacking in data collection. And most importantly, where fraudsters were taking advantage of us. So those skill sets and that knowledge and those analytics and that oversight is critically important, because when you're building a platform of solutions, for your chief product officer, you've got to be able to address the pain points that your fraud teams are seeing. And at the same time, ISS is at the table. Your, AML, BSA folks are there for compliance and reporting. So I think all of the teams contribute, but I think fraud is it's a very important function and one that needs support in terms of digitalization, automation, and leveraging the tools that are in the market, because otherwise you're just going to fall behind.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's intel and experience and expertise that each of those individuals, whether junior or on the way up, that feeds into how you build out this strategy and across all these different lines of business. And I'm fascinated by the people who come up through those ranks and get to managerial strategic roles and have to say, listen, I'm not investigating fraud. I'm not managing a team of fraud anymore. I have to work across many lines of businesses, manage those relationships, be at that 30,000 foot view, and how they, when you step into roles like that, folks like yourself who have been doing it early days for Mastercard, which didn't have the fraud components, but there's skill sets to that. There's business skill sets, there's executive level leadership and how you manage relationships and how you advocate for things and push, pull, all of that just because you were the best fraud fighter, or whatever that means, doesn't mean that'll transition into that type of role. So from a career pathing standpoint, I think it's great to have people who have that that strong business knowledge, that strong experience in strategic thinking and compromise, and and I think it's not that you can't come up through the fraud ranks and learn that. It's not that you can't when you're someone like yourself go into the weeds every now and then to learn why they were doing all the different things they were doing to justify that business case for a piece of technology or whatever it is. But like you said, like a team, you have people with those different skill sets, and we grow. I think fraud in particular, you do grow up in different areas and you find different ways into this thing. And then sometimes you're like, man, I want to be a leader. I want to be an executive. And then you look back on that and you're like, why the heck did I do that? Now but you want that track. Some people want to be an individual contributor. Some people want to go deep down the data science or analytics route, right? So, and you can still be senior in these different roles. Jeff Finio-Cario, I think that's how you say it. I'm going to be butchered for butchering his name. But he's a very senior level leader, but very data science focused, very, very, so I guess what I'm trying to say is you can propel your career into more senior level roles, and you can come from different areas. You got to figure out where you fit. And it sounds like these strategic digitization efforts at these large banks were a really good fit for you.
Yeah, and they're all, everyone is an individual, and no matter what function you're in, you're going to have to go through that decision-making process. And my old boss, Gareth Gaston, would never like when I say this, but I don't do any real work anymore, which the point was, as you move up, you're going to do less and less tactical and more strategic. And those are things that you just need to assess and determine, what do you love to do and what do you find challenging and what's your comfort level. But you do find that, finance people, accounting people. I mean, I was a MBA in corporate finance and strategic planning and always been a numbers guy. But early in my career, got involved in new business development and innovation and moved into that area. And that Mastercard and then kind of going forward was really an accelerant in my career. everyone has to always kind of assess that and figure out what level they want to get to and what is it going to take to get you there.
Yeah. And you get people like me who just go to some weird entrepreneurial journey and build communities and stuff, but it fits with my personality, the things I like to do. And, I think that's why it's always hard when people are like, well, where do you career path in fraud? I'm like, how much time do we have? Like there's lots of options, right? And a lot of it is actually knowing yourself more than knowing your options, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. We can get into the options, but you got to start with what you do well, what you like to do, what makes you tick, where you think you provide substantial value, maybe above somebody else, and not. I find myself, others, some people get in the rabbit hole of the things they don't do well and measuring themselves against somebody else. Like if you measured me against Jeff on a technical level, it wouldn't be a very close comparison. So, but like, people who are driven and achieving, they want to be good at lots of things, and you're always comparing yourself in sports and in academics, and it's all good stuff because you're driving, you care, right?
Yeah.
But you got to eventually turn off your brain, or put out, turn off the noise to a point, and be a little bit more focused on what you do well, and have some confidence in that and develop that over time. And I think some of that comes with maturity and age and good mentors. And I guess on the career path concept, if you were getting that question from I'd say like a young fraud fighter, but just somebody wanting to get into the industry, what's a good piece of advice on developing their career? I know there's probably lots of things, but anything that resonates with you.
I've been trying to make sure when somebody asks me now for one piece, I only give them
Like
one,
one, I know.
because it's usually like four.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is to find mentors,
Mm,
because that's something that is not one and done, but should be a lifetime of work. I still have mentors. I'm semi-retired and I still have mentors, because there are people that are doing some really cool stuff that I'd like to do, as well. And I love seeing where people are going with their career. But early on, I think it's really important to find somebody who you admire and who you connect with on a personal level, so that you can have some, you know, trusted relationship
yeah.
where you can talk to folks about, the career path and what skills do I need? Where should I be focusing my efforts? And it's not an annual review type of thing, but they're relationships. And when I was a kid, I was an incredibly shy kid, which no one could ever fathom at this point of my life. And my father used to say that all the time: go out and talk to people. And, going out and finding mentors your entire life is critically important. It doesn't have to be one, it can be multiple. They can change over time, but find people that can help you. Find people that help you grow. As you develop this network, I mean, because that's your mentors help you build the network. I'm at a point in my career where a lot of my network is younger than me, and that's a good thing, right? You constantly want to build that. But I think, you guys have done a great job with About Fraud and the Fraud Fight Club by bringing in people that are really experienced, but are, really focused on not just the how and the why, but how do you develop as an individual? So a lot about storytelling and how do you get your message out? The more personal parts of fraud, how so many individuals are hurt by it. There's so many aspects to the business that are really, really important. But I think it's important for folks starting out in a career, especially in this space, but any space, like find good mentors, find people that can help you learn. Because, like I said, at a certain level, you're not going to be doing the work that got you there. So you really have to kind of look at it. And as you move up in fraud, a lot of it is because it's so dynamic and it's so digital. You need platforms and infrastructure and vendors. And, what you need is really good partners.
Yeah.
It's not so much you kind of doing the research and calling and doing stuff on your own. So
Yeah.
I've always thought it's incredibly important to be committed to learning and growing and finding the spaces where you feel comfortable, where you personally and professionally are growing. And I think mentor and a network of mentors is the most important thing.
Yeah. And that, I mean, fits well. I like not the one and done, because I think of like the conference and the resources we have. And the more I do it, like a good session, a good deep dive, a good talk is nice. It is one and done. You learn a thing or two. How much you remember is always dependent. But if you have a relationship with somebody that you can call on repeatedly, and that's exponentially valuable for a fraud attack, for career advice, just to lift you up.
Because it's
You lose your job, you get laid off. There's just so many reasons that can support you. And so as we grow our community, just doubling down on the relationship component and not being so narrow that it's just, hey, I know synthetic identity fraud, I can teach you tactical stuff. That could be a piece of it. But it's like being comfortable enough with that person or whoever it is. And everyone's different, right? Everyone jives with different personalities. But to say, hey, you can be a lifelong resource and maybe friend. And I know that's weird. And it's for some people because work, and then you have friends outside of work. But I don't know, in this industry, especially I mean, you go through enough headaches, executive level stuff. You need somebody who has been in your shoes, who can give you real talk back. It's like when I played soccer, my mom would be a sounding board. She was generally just 100% positive. I gave up 5 goals and she was like, "You did so good." And I'm like, "Thanks, Mom. You're that." And then I would talk to my dad, who knew the sport a little bit better, and he would say things in a different way that helped me grow. And so it's
thank God for the crossbar, right? Yeah.
well, it's just like it's just like, so and those are kind of weird examples. It's just I like the idea of a person and a relationship, just how much more value that can provide. Not to say certifications are bad or taking continuing education. All these things are going to teach you different things, but in this industry, the relationships seem invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we have so many tools and there's so much information. And with COVID, made it incredibly challenging for all of us. I mean, I think human interaction is incredibly important.
Yeah.
I started work when, way back when everyone around me smoked in the office. So going back to work 3 days a week, wearing whatever I want is pretty cool to me.
Yeah.
But I do think that, the networking and the mentoring is all part of, I think, personal interaction, which I think is incredibly important for everybody. And it's something that, sometimes you just have to make a real effort. But
yeah, and if you're a younger, and I'm going to move on, or I
we'll
talked to
be
you.
here forever.
I talked to you at the beginning of this. Like I always, I'm like, oh, we'll be short and we'll be punchy, and we never are, because usually to me, he's just like, I love this topic. But the people, like I know some people will look at me or others, and they're like, of course you can develop a network. You're outgoing. You like to talk to people. Blah blah blah. And I don't always like to talk to people. But the other thing is, I think introverts, extroverts, something in the middle. I would argue a lot of people who grow up in fraud are not extroverts. It's not their natural thing. But it doesn't need to be, I'm on a big stage, I'm attending massive conferences and have to network with like 50 people. And then I'm just going to, have to recharge for like a week. I think you try to meet that where you are and challenge yourself to maybe be uncomfortable in some situations, but not to the point where it's almost like you're just like, I'm not going to do this thing. It's not for me. And also the more you do it in bite-sized bits, the more natural it becomes, like any skill, even if it's not your go-to thing. And I guess the last point I'll say on that is, I would argue a lot of the people I like to network with actually are the people who are listening and not waiting for their chance to talk the entire time, which people might say about me. I don't know. I hope not. But like, so don't, like, if you're more of a reserved person and you're thoughtfully listening to them, that person is probably going to really appreciate that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So into a couple, not fraud topics as much, but I'd love to understand, because and it kind of is a good segue. People are more than just, their jobs or their tasks or their roles. They're complete people, whether you're finding mentors or people to kind of be your buddies in fraud. And I'm always interested in what people do outside, whether it's nonprofit work or just other stuff. So you've done volunteer work and fundraising since 2006 for the Foundation of Orthopedics and Complex Spine, something I wasn't familiar with, which makes it cooler because I can learn about it. But it's a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide quality orthopedic care to patients in underserved communities throughout the world. So what I thought was interesting, this is a very specific thing. So in my mind, I'm like, there had to have been something that drew you to this cause versus many other good causes. And I was curious, what drew you into that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's just one of those experiences that is incredibly frightening and terrible, and turns out to be an incredibly amazing and fulfilling experience. I have three daughters, grown daughters. My oldest daughter, Alexandra, at 13, went to school on a Thursday, got a call from the school doctor saying they needed to talk to us. And in a routine physical exam in gym, they found something particular about her spine because they do scoliosis tests. So we went immediately to a specialist locally. We were living up in Connecticut. Um, took some x-rays. The doctor came out and said, sorry, there's nothing I can do to help you. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you talking about? And as it turns out, she had two curves in her spine. So she had an S curve in her spine, so that she didn't tilt because she had two of them. So we immediately had to go out, kind of medical emergency. At 13 years old, you have to get that cleared up pretty quickly, or the longer it goes, the harder the surgery and recovery. But we ended up, we went up to a hospital up in Connecticut, and for some reason, the doctor canceled the appointment, and we were distraught. And our local doctor found another doctor in New York, and we went to see him. This wonderful surgeon, Dr. Oheneba Buachi Ajay, who worked at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York City. And he was just absolutely amazing. I mean, the bedside manner was just incredible. Those types of surgeries are incredibly difficult. They're 8, 10, 12-hour surgeries, reconstructive surgery, putting rods in a child's back. So obviously my daughter was just devastated, and he was just amazing. And, as we started the process with him, my wife actually was watching the Discovery Channel, and they had a special on him. And they showed all the wonderful things that he was doing for his patients, but also that he was from Ghana. And as a child, he was saved by a traveling doctor in his home country and decided, I'm going to be a doctor. So he went to school, came to the US, became a surgeon, focused in scoliosis because in that part of the world, just because of the nutritional challenges and everything else they've got going on there, there's a huge amount of scoliosis. So he actually started a foundation, which we've been supporting. But we knew nothing about it until my wife saw the show. And we went back in to see him and we said, "You never told us anything." And he's a very modest guy. And,
Yeah, of course, sure.
the surgery went very well. My daughter can do everything. She's got a healthy granddaughter. She cannot do horseback jumping or bungee jumping. But other than that, she's good. But we, excuse me, we actually were very fortunate of the doctor. The surgery went really well. We got engaged in his foundation. So we actually, my wife and my oldest daughter are teachers, and many other family members are. We collected thousands of books, pallets full of books from all of the schools around Northern Virginia. They were just throwing them out, workbooks, everything, and had them shipped to Ghana. And we built a library for all of the patients that are there, because they'll have 30 or 40 patients at the hospital at once. And it was great to be able to support it in such a meaningful way. So we continue to contribute financially. They have galas every year that we support. But it's interesting how something, so challenging and devastating can, at the end of the day, turn out to be something pretty amazing. And he's an amazing guy, and he's helped thousands of people and does all the surgeries in Ghana for free.
Wow.
Yeah. So amazing experience.
That's why I like asking questions like this, because not the other questions aren't important or interesting, but these personal experiences are what drive us to, and usually often unexpected, tough times we go through, kids, which is even harder than yourself. And then they get you passionate about supporting it because you connected to the pain and the challenges, so you want to help, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I do that with myself for mental health wherever I can. There's, some family things that we support because they impact your family. And I'd argue if ever, that's how, some of these good things are supported and contributed to, because we all, some people go through cancer or diabetes, or like I said, more mental type illnesses, or, military, and then there's PTSD. And people can relate to that. I think when you live it, or you have somebody live it, you're so emotionally connected to it that, of course, you have your job. You didn't stop your job or do any of that stuff, but it's the areas we naturally fill in with our passions, because it hit us, right? It hit us, deeper than other things. And it doesn't mean we don't care about those other causes, but there's obviously only so much you can support. And I think those stories help complete who we are as people, which contribute, frankly, to who we are as professionals. So
Yep,
that's
absolutely.
how it ties in. Now, this is a much more lighthearted question. You attended Colby College,
Yes, I
and
did.
I knew
What a
you
real
were.
name. Yes.
Yeah. I knew you were involved in track, but according to LinkedIn, if it's accurate, you're the current holder of men's high jump school record there. So I won't dispute this or fact check it, but I'm just curious if you can still hit that mark at your current age.
The height was 2.09 meters, which is 6'10" and 3/4. I can touch it. I can't get my hips over it, but I still play some hoops. I played hoop in college too, but I ended up, obviously being a high jumper, I could jump.
Yeah.
So I really was more renowned for being the best warm-up Division III basketball player, because I
There
could
you
dunk
go.
it any which way you could. But played that for a couple of years, and I just picked up the high jump kind of on a whim, and it was an amazing experience because I had basically done team sports the entire time. So it
Yeah.
was good to do something individually. And yeah, the record still stands. It's amazing. I was out with my high school or my college roommates recently, and they were regaling me stories about still holding the high jump
There
record.
you go. There you go. Well, as a person who can't jump very high at all, actually, which was frustrating. I played goalkeeper and I could get to the sides pretty good, but those rocket shots into the corner, I could have
Yeah.
used your high jumping abilities. Cool. We'll wrap up with this, which is fraud related for the most part. I named this Fight Back Interviews, and so we asked all our guests kind of what keeps you fighting back, and it's different. Like some people are in the thick of it, and it's like, you could probably find easier careers, or it could beat you down to the point where it's, enough is enough. I think with your case, it's interesting because you do say semi-retired, which is true when I see all the work you're doing. But you could be fully retired if you want. So what keeps you at this stage of your life staying involved and being in fraud fighting?
Well, two things. I think, the industry is amazing and the people are amazing. From an industry standpoint, as you heard, I've kind of been involved in the digitalization of banking services since the inception. And the amount of innovation that's happening today is amazing. And a lot of the tools with passkeys and mobile driver's license and decentralized identity, the plethora of new vendors out there and new platforms, and everything that's happening in the AI space, which I'm glad you didn't ask me a question about, because everybody does. But
Yeah.
there's so much going on, and I have such a deep knowledge. I'm fortunate to be able to advise for a couple of fintechs and be able to help them position their products, define their roadmap, their go-to-market strategies, how are big banks looking to deploy these? Who are all the different stakeholders, which the fraud team is front and center. But it's been an amazing experience, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to do it in a way that I can play golf and do other things, hang out with my family and my granddaughter, have some
Yeah.
time there. So it's a nice balance. And like I said, the people are great. We've had such growth in this industry over the last 10 years. And I think, the fraud aspect of it has really been brought front and center. Initially it was security, right? And then it was locking everything down, and then nobody was getting in, and then you loosened it and everyone was getting in. And I think, we have so many more people involved with amazing skill sets and backgrounds. And like I said, at the Fraud Fight Club, I thought it was pretty amazing that you and Ron had brought in like Ian, Mitchell from Mission Omega, and Aaron West, and the work that they do around victims, because this is not a victimless situation. And sometimes people look at it that way. But, as a fraud fighter, especially the people that are on the front lines, you're dealing with, your neighbors, right? People in
Yeah.
your town, people in your state. And I think we've got, a great industry and a great group of people that are really trying to help, the banks and the customers be more successful by getting platforms out there that balance security, give a good customer experience, at the same time make them feel good and trust the bank and trust the people that are working there. And at the same time, just managing the fraud. There are so many things going on that it's pretty challenging. But yeah, I have loved being in this industry, and it's fun to stay attached. It's a lot of people getting involved in it, and a certain part of the advisory work is mentoring people. So it helps me give back a little bit too. And it's been great.
I mean, fitting in like you said, your life at that point is important. And if you can do that and continue to challenge your mind, pass on your knowledge. It's never going to stop probably challenging the complexities of some of these problems. You throw AI in there, so, and that's, I would imagine, for somebody who likes technology, who likes complex problem solving. It's it's an interesting thing that doesn't get dull. And then you can connect with an end purpose too. You can see that. I
Yeah.
think that all jobs have a purpose. It's how closely you can connect with, identify with it, believe in it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That helps, especially when it's not work you always have to do. You're kind of choosing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's good to find something that you love to do and that you love the people and you want to stay engaged. You can kind of pick and choose. And, I've done pretty much all the projects around home. So I'm not in my wife's hair and I'm not building spreadsheets for my kids, my adult daughters and all that kind of stuff. So it
Yeah.
keeps me out of their hair too. But seriously, it's been a great opportunity. It's been a lot of fun and I'll continue to do it as long as it's fun and as long as I can add value.
Well,
So
it's a young industry. I think when
yeah,
you're retired and when I'm retired, which is, let's keep pushing that back, it's still gonna be growing and being figured out, right? Like there's just the human nature of people stealing and deceiving, and it's a problem. And if you look at it from like a business case, it's a business problem that is not going to go away. It's going to
yeah,
morph, it's going to change, which means there's always going to need to be solutions, and not just technology solutions, processes and people and teams. And so I think when you're in the industry long enough, you're actually surprised. You lose sight of how small, early it is. I guess I'd say early it
yeah,
is. So paving the way for future generations, I guess.
yeah, yeah,
Um, cool. Well, thank you, Brian, for spending 45, 50 minutes with me. You mentioned golf. You got a round of that in this morning, and now we got to chat, which was a lot of fun.
yeah. Appreciate the time, PJ, and happy to share my years of wisdom with everybody. So
We're happy to listen to it. So
excellent.
Till next time. This has been our fight back interview, and yeah, thank you again, Brian.